Morton Prince was an American physician and psychologist whose book Dissociation of a Personality became a bestseller in its time. The book tells the story of Miss Christine Beauchamp, a woman suffering from multiple personality disorder, MPD. Miss Beauchamp exhibited multiple distinct personalities known as B1, B2, and B3. These personalities had hidden memories and were associated with hallucinations. Miss Beauchamp herself was the personality known as B2. B2 was aware of B1, and B3 was aware of both B1 and B2, but B1 had no knowledge of the other two personalities. Ultimately, the strongest personality dominated the others and became the primary one. This case and the theories surrounding it proved to be highly beneficial in crime investigations. Morton Prince and MPD, multiple personality disorder. Morton Prince, an influential American physician and psychologist, wrote the best-selling book Dissociation of a Personality, which explores the case of Miss Christine Beauchamp, a patient suffering from MPD. She exhibited three distinct personalities, B1, B2, and B3, each with different awareness of the others. Over time, the strongest personality took control, integrating the others. This case became significant for understanding MPD and even assisted in advancing crime investigations through insights into dissociative disorders. Before the space age, there was an artistic impression of what the surface of Venus might look like, blending science fiction and scientific speculation. Up until 1956, before space exploration truly began, it was imagined that Venus could have a lush, Earth-like environment. However, this idea wasn't entirely disproved until 1967, when detailed measurements of Venus were conducted. The Mariner 4 and Mariner 5 missions confirmed earlier suspicions that Venus's surface was extremely hot and covered by clouds made of sulfuric acid, not the water cycle previously imagined. The reality of Venus only became clear after in situ measurements by spacecraft. Though some Earth-like features were later detected by the Venus Express mission, it was evident that Venus was far less Earth-like than once believed. Venus's surface before space exploration. Before the space age, there was an artistic and scientific belief that Venus had a lush, Earth-like environment. However, in 1967, detailed measurements from space missions like Mariner 4 and 5 showed that Venus was, in fact, extremely hot, with clouds made of sulfuric acid. This data challenged earlier theories of a watery, habitable Venus, and subsequent space exploration confirmed that Venus was much less Earth-like than originally thought, though some Earth-like features do exist. This brings us to the concept of a universal philosophy, which asserts that certain values apply to everyone. At first glance, this may seem unlikely given the 205 or 206 countries in the world, but liberal theory argues otherwise. According to liberal theory, there are shared value structures that apply to all people, regardless of nationality. This concept underpins the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which rely on values that apply to all humans simply because they are human. This idea is also tested in the universality of sports, like football. Why does everyone play football? It's because the game is governed by simple, universal rules that everyone follows. However, the way football is played differs by culture. Brazilian football is distinct from Italian, British, German, and Spanish styles, while still adhering to the same fundamental principle. Universal philosophy and liberal theory. Liberal theory posits that certain core values apply universally to all people, regardless of nationality or culture, as reflected in global organizations like the United Nations and concepts like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In sports, this idea manifests in football, soccer, where, despite cultural variations in playing styles, the basic rules remain the same for everyone. This balance of universal rules with cultural specificity is a key tenet of liberal theory. Mars, the fourth planet from the Sun and the second smallest in the solar system after Mercury, is named after the Roman god of war. Often called the Red Planet due to the iron oxide on its surface, Mars is a terrestrial planet with a thin atmosphere, marked by impact craters, volcanoes, valleys, deserts, and polar ice caps. Its rotational period and seasonal cycles closely resemble Earth's, as its axial tilt produces similar seasons. Mars is home to Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system, and Valles Marineris, one of the largest canyons. Until the successful Mars flyby in 1965 by Mariner 4, many speculated that liquid water existed on the Martian surface. Periodic variations in light and dark patches, particularly near the poles, were thought to be seas and continents. Geological evidence from unmanned missions later suggested that Mars once had large bodies of water on its surface in earlier stages of its history. Mars's characteristics and early exploration. Mars, known as the Red Planet, is the fourth planet from the Sun and has many similarities to Earth, including seasonal cycles and geological features like volcanoes and canyons. Early observations led scientists to speculate about the presence of liquid water on Mars. However, after the first successful flyby in 1965 by Mariner 4, it was discovered that Mars is largely dry, though evidence suggests it once had significant water coverage in its ancient past. Many parents raise their children to be bilingual, often because they themselves speak more than one language or come from different cultural backgrounds. These parents believe that this will benefit their children's language development. However, children can become confused when their parents use different languages to refer to the same object. If one parent consistently uses one language and the other sticks to a different language, this confusion can be avoided. Bilingual parenting and language confusion. Many parents raise their children with two languages, believing it will enhance their language development. However, children can become confused if both parents use different languages to describe the same objects or situations inconsistently. To avoid this confusion, it is recommended that one parent consistently uses one language and the other sticks to another, helping the child distinguish between the two languages more effectively. A leader can define or clarify goals by issuing a memo or an executive order, an edict, a fatwa, or a tweet, by passing a law, barking a command, or presenting an interesting idea in a meeting of colleagues. Leaders can mobilize people's energies in ways that range from subtle, quiet persuasion to the coercive threat or the use of deadly force. Sometimes a charismatic leader, such as Martin Luther King Jr., can define goals and mobilize energies through rhetoric and the power of example. We can think of leadership as a spectrum in terms of both visibility and the power the leader wields. On one end of the spectrum, we have the most visible, authoritative leaders like the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or a dictator such as Hitler or Gaddafi. At the opposite end of the spectrum is casual, low-key leadership found in countless situations every day around the world. Leadership that can make a significant difference to the individuals whose lives are touched by it. Over the centuries, the first kind, the out-in-front authoritative leadership, has generally been exhibited by men. Some men in positions of great authority, including Nelson Mandela, have chosen a strategy of leading from behind. More often, however, top leaders have been quite visible in their exercise of power. Women, as well as some men, have provided casual, low-key leadership behind the scenes. Goals and leaders can define goals and mobilize people in various ways, from issuing memos or commands to using rhetoric or subtle persuasion. Leadership exists on a spectrum, from highly visible figures like presidents and dictators to low-key everyday leaders who also make an impact. Historically, men have occupied the most visible leadership roles, but more women are now stepping into authoritative positions. Aquaculture, the farming of fish, shrimp, shellfish, and seaweeds, has been a source of human protein for nearly 4,000 years, particularly in Asia. However, in the last decade, there has been unprecedented growth in aquaculture production, over 300% since 1984, which has significantly increased its importance in the modern food supply. It is the world's fastest growing food production activity. Globally, more than 25% of the total fishing and shellfish production in 1999 was attributed to aquaculture. Yet, the industry's contributions to the human diet are even greater than the numbers suggest, as one-third of the conventional fish catch is used to produce fish meal and fish oil. Virtually all farmed fish are used directly as human food. Today, nearly one-third of the fish consumed by humans is a product of aquaculture, and this percentage is set to increase as aquaculture expands, while the world's conventional fish catch from oceans and lakes continues to decline due to overfishing and environmental damage. Aquaculture, the farming of fish, shrimp, shellfish, and seaweeds, has been an essential source of protein for thousands of years, especially in Asia. Recently, aquaculture has grown significantly, now accounting for a large portion of the world's fish supply as conventional fishing declines due to overfishing and environmental damage. The industry's importance to the global food supply is growing rapidly. In India, many people work as community service workers. Quarterly meetings are held to provide them with training and consultation, enabling them to understand how to prevent the spread of diseases in communities, such as HIV, which is difficult to control. This precautionary knowledge is taught by professionals from large hospitals and organizations. However, in some cities, large consultations are not suitable because it is difficult for target groups, particularly those in remote areas, to gather. In such cases, professional teams must cross rivers to deliver the training. In India, community service workers receive quarterly training to help prevent the spread of diseases like HIV. This training is provided by professionals, though in remote areas, extra efforts are required to reach target populations, such as crossing rivers to deliver the training. I appreciate this opportunity to speak about Australia's engagement with Asia from a trade perspective, and I would like to say a few words about what trade is doing in this space. I am particularly pleased to address trade and investment, not only because the two are inextricably linked, but also because Australia now reports to its first ever Minister for Trade and Investment. Asia's importance to Australia's economy is increasing by the day, and it is one of the most crucial factors when assessing international conditions for national prosperity. Asian demand for Australian exports has enabled Australia to manage the global financial crisis better than most other developed economies, perhaps better than all others. Investment from Asia has also boosted the productive capacity of Australia's economy and overall productivity. In 2013, 7 of Australia's top 10 export markets were in Asia, accounting for 65% of its total exports. Asian markets and Australia's geographic proximity are not only vital to trade ties and access to important global supply chains, but also to the level of foreign investment in the country. Over the past decade, FDI in Australia has increased significantly, more than doubling from $292 billion to $630 billion in 2013. Australia's economic relationship with Asia is increasingly important, especially in trade and investment. Asian demand for Australian exports has helped Australia navigate the global financial crisis, while foreign investment from Asia has boosted productivity and economic growth. A significant portion of Australia's exports now go to Asian markets. During this time, my goal is to discuss the phenomenon of emotion, which we may share in part with other animals as well as our language. I will also explore new technologies such as brain imaging and functional magnetic imaging as we try to answer long-standing questions about how motivation and emotion function. To begin, I will present a scenario that some of you may be familiar with, developed by Pavlov over a century ago. In this scenario, a dog hears a sound, waits, and is then fed food powder. This process is repeated, and as it continues, interesting things begin to happen. Pavlov's study focused on the dog's salivation, which increased over time. However, other things were happening as well. The dog moved around more, and all kinds of activity were taking place. In today's experiment, we aim to capture what is happening in the brain to produce this state, which we call a competitive state. You can also think of this state in terms of how the dog feels, similar to how you might feel as you anticipate lunch today. A discussion on emotions and motivation is introduced, referencing Pavlov's experiments with dogs. These experiments show how repeated stimuli can condition behavior, and similar processes occur in the brain when humans experience emotions, such as the anticipation of food. The goal is to understand how emotions and brain activity are linked.